Welcome to Class 2. Today we're going to begin by looking at life from the Creator's point of view. And then we're going to probe deeper into the process of our spiritual development. We'll look more into conflict and investigate fear and what being harmed is really about. Then we'll look into a number of techniques that hopefully will help you better manage your life. So let me take a look at life from the Creator's point of view. The wounding you received in childhood, and this is hard to believe, was purposeful and perfectly tailored to what you needed to work on to complete your spiritual development. Now, your wounding, as I have said, is your tendency to be influenced by negative energies that in turn leads to the creation of your beliefs. So what you believe about yourself is negative and, by the way, untrue. For example, you may feel unworthy or unlovable, but this cannot possibly be true. But so long as you believe it, you'll be out of alignment with the truth. And because of that, you will create conflicts either within yourself or with others. Now, dealing with the conflicts is where we usually stop, but there is more. If you dig beneath your part of the conflict, you will find your beliefs that are misaligned with the truth. If those were not there, you simply would let the situation pass you by and not get hooked. Now, let me give you an example. A common situation is you not loving yourself. So when it comes to having a relationship, you won't be able to fully engage, and your emotional withholding is going to lead to problems, conflict within yourself and with your prospective partner. For your part, because of the false beliefs you hold about yourself. Otherwise, if you were centered in the truth, you'd just be compassionate towards them and not get hooked. There'd be no conflict. Now, looking at life, the poet Coggiori said, "A purposeful life is the most important thing in the world, and love is the most important purpose of all." And Coggiori didn't say this, but self-love is the real test. Now, I want to give you 4 principles. First, false desires and fear lead to suffering. Compassion never hurts. Pure experience does not bind. And real love is never frustrated. Now, let's look at conflict for a minute. Conflict takes 2. Either one person divided against herself, or 2 people attached to differing beliefs. The thing is, you can't be really happy so long as you hold your beliefs, because beliefs conflict with the truth. And in a nutshell, resolving that conflict is what life is about. That is the process of life. Now consider, because of my bias, I am convinced that the ocean is pink. There'll be no problem with this until I run into contrary information. And by the way, that's why we need other people in our lives, because they provide conflicts for us to deal with so that what we might investigate our own beliefs. Now, another example. Let's suppose I am supporting Count Dracula for president. You listen and conclude, Ross is nuts, and you go on about your business. Why is that? Well, because you have no investment in the issue. Therefore, there is no conflict. But if I were to say you are a piece of garbage, you and I might have a conflict. The difference is that you now have an investment in what I said. Otherwise, like with Count Dracula, when you know the truth, what I say simply has no impact. You essentially just walk away, unless the other person needs your help, which is a different matter. But if we could learn to work with our conflicts, they have the potential to show us where our beliefs are misaligned with the truth. Now, here's why the life process is the way that it is and what confounds us. The most powerful way for a human to learn is to start out believing something and then, after conflict, pain, and struggle, come to experience that what they first believed was untrue. Notice, please, that I did not say no, I said experience. Now, that's a challenging way to learn, but it is extraordinarily effective. Now, there are two ways to look at the events of your life. Either as a consequence of your imperfections, as most people do, or highlighting the places you need to grow and develop, which is the Creator's desire for us, and which unfortunately almost no one does. Now, how does that work? It's simple, really. Pain comes from your disharmonious choices, whereas holding compassion feels good. Carrying a belief is painful, and when you're not being compassionate, it hurts. The Creator is asking you to look at your beliefs. Now, with pain, there's a chance that you will. Without pain, it is likely that you would not. Now, we're so used to being closed off that we have become numb to our pain. Being closed off has become our new normal. So the universe, in response, has to turn up the volume in order to get our attention. Now, I want to speak about fear for a minute. There are two kinds of fear. Real fear is the fear of physical harm that causes us to be cautious. Fear of snakes, spiders, fearing a heart attack, that kind of thing. That fear can save your life. The fight or flight instinct is there for a reason. This is a real fear. And we won't deal with it here because being physically harmed operates under different principles than the psychological wounding we are going to be talking about. I want you to consider what I call emotional fear. That kind of fear can hold you back from taking risks and from having the life you desire. Emotional fear comes from the ego, and it's about the fear of a personal insult. It comes from an insecurity. In other words, something that will make us feel bad or embarrass us. Now, set aside whatever the issue is for the moment. Your fear is that someone will expose the flaws in you. Now, what does that really mean? Well, what is the significance of being exposed? It's an emotional manifestation that comes from your need for protection from a perceived insult. This fear resonates with the wounds you received in childhood that have yet to be healed. But let's look at harm for a minute. Let me ask you, other than physical harm, what do you really need protection from? Being embarrassed? Being called out? At that moment, the fear of emotional harm is controlling you. Now, we live with an undercurrent of being criticized, condemned, that sort of thing. And as a result, your world is not emotionally safe. Your inner one feels unprotectable because she believes she is defective and unworthy. But this is a vulnerability you can address. Now, we don't often see things this way. While physical insults can lead to actual harm, this is not true with emotional pain. And we get opportunity after opportunity to look at the false beliefs we carry and resolve the pain we feel from our incompleteness. Otherwise, like with my Dracula thing, these situations would simply not affect you. Now, if people choose to avoid, then the cycle will repeat with increased intensity. Not as punishment, but as a further wake up call that our beliefs are still out of alignment. Now, finding your way out of the mental fear state is an essential part of the life process. The goal is to bring you to your natural state of compassion, which is not a mental state. But in order to do that, you must feel safe. So let's talk for a minute about being hurt. To reiterate, I'm not speaking of physical harm. Our emotional woundedness comes almost entirely from the words that other people speak. And the thing is, by themselves, words do not have the power to harm. Someone else's words are only vibrations in the air. And here's the hook: until you give them meaning. To be hurt by something that someone else says, you have to give what they say credence. You have to take it in. Being hurt is an inside job. Your pain comes from your attachment to what you believe because what they said resonates with what you believe about yourself. Examples. Notice your reaction to me when I say, as opposed to, you're not worthy or you're not lovable. What happens inside you then? Where do you go? Now, another example, and this is an interesting one. What is your reaction when I say, you have blue hair? You probably don't react. Why is that? Because you know the truth. You don't have blue hair. So what does being hurt actually mean? It dents your ego, hurts your pride, and worse, as I said, it confirms the dark secret that you hold about yourself. Emotional fear calls attention to something you think is faulty or flawed in you, to which you react. Otherwise, there would be no issue. You just go about your business.